Hi, everybody. Welcome back to BSB Preview, where we are reading from our August 2020 releases. Yay! George Pierce is our fan club today. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we are going to give you a couple of minutes to click your links and filter in here. And while we do, I have a question for our authors. And that question is, tell us who you are and tell us what your quarantine hobby is. So let's start with Georgia Beers. Oh, I already told you who she was. In case you didn't.
I was going to say, I'm Georgia Beers, but that's kind of repetitive. I write traditional contemporary romance. Been doing it for a long time. And my quarantine hobby, man, I think it's binging new and old TV shows. Like I'm going back and binging TV shows that everybody watched when they were on and I didn't. So I'm doing that now. So I will say that.
So what's your favorite?
So far it's been Dexter.
Good one.
Yeah.
All right. Michelle, what's your quarantine hobby?
So I'm Michelle Larkin, and I write suspense thrillers with a paranormal twist. And my hobby during quarantine has been, as you can see behind me, to organize the kids' toys in all these bins with labels. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I've organized the entire house like this. Kids aren't too happy, but I am.
So as soon as we can, be social again, I feel like I need to invite you over and share your talent. It'd be awesome.
Anytime.
Jesse, yep, cool. How about you? Tell us about you and what's your quarantine hobby?
I'm Jessie Thoma. I write kind of action, adventure, and also contemporary romance. I guess my quarantine hobby has been hiding from COVID and learning way more about my neighbors than I thought. I think probably I need to know. We've also been setting up this really strange barter system in the neighborhood, which has been useful. But like I said, now I know a lot more about my neighbors than I probably needed to.
Any good gossip or just things you really didn't want to know?
It depends. We've been shopping for one of our neighbors next door, and you learn a lot about people when you buy groceries for them. And then the guy who lives next door has a real affinity for 80s, really bad pop music when he's gardening. So I didn't know that.
There was no bad pop music in the 80s. I'm sorry.
It depends on how loud it is and what hour of the morning it is.
I will give you that.
Yeah. Usually I was at work, but now I hear it.
Okay, Sinjin, tell us about you and what's your quarantine hobby?
Sure. My name's Karp. I write comedy novels. I've written 2 YA novels in the past, and this is my first novel for adults. My quarantine hobby, I'm 99% sure I might have had COVID in like April for a very brief period of time. So my hobby since then has just been licking all the doorknobs and basking in the freedom I've got from my immunity.
That is such a good hobby. I totally need to take that up.
You don't realize how much you miss licking doorknobs until you can't.
I never realized how much I touched my face until I couldn't, and then it was...
That's very true. I never realized how much I touched my face until I tried wearing makeup and then immediately smeared it all over my face.
That's true. They have some good ones out now, though. I feel like at least some of the brands have mastered that, thank goodness. Alrighty. So we have our lovely author panel here. We are waiting on Kathleen Knowles. Hopefully she will jump in soon. So without further delay, we are going to start with Michelle Larkin, reading from her August 2020 release, Silver and Gold. So tell us a little bit about it and read whenever you're ready.
Sure. So I'm actually a little nervous about this reading. But I've been practicing here at home, with the kids in the background. So if you guys could yell, "Mom," and start calling each other poopy head while I'm reading, that would be great.
All right, you guys heard that. Get right on it.
Yeah, so I have a 3 and a 10-year-old, and you can only imagine. They're here full-time, 24/7, except for right now. So the scene setup is Boston homicide detective Reed Silver is really good at her job because she can talk to the dead. But she struggles to keep her gift a secret when the new boss saddles her with rookie London Gold. The serial killer they're tracking just abducted Reed's partner, a bull mastiff named Mugshot. Reed's now home alone after a long day working the case with London. Okay, you ready?
Go for it.
Reed's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since lunch. At this time of night, she'd usually have a bowl of popcorn in her lap with Mug beside her. Sharing their favorite late-night snack, they'd watch old reruns of NYPD Blue. But she couldn't even bring herself to make the popcorn, let alone eat it, not without her best bud. She felt her adrenaline kick in and switched off the TV, suddenly angry with herself for putting Mug in harm's way. Not knowing if he was okay was driving her nuts. How would she live with herself if something happened to him? Deciding a brisk stroll around the neighborhood would do her good, she stood from the couch. The doorbell rang and she froze. Could this be the killer returning Mug? No one ever came to her door. She checked her watch. 11:02 p.m. She crept silently across the living room in her bare feet. Careful not to touch the door for fear of making a creak, she peered through the peephole. London smiled and waved. Maybe, if she was quiet, London would give up and go away. All she had to do was wait her out. I know you're looking through the peephole, Reed. Reed held her breath, determined to ride this out in stealthy silence. The trick here was to remain quiet and make London believe she was dead. If you don't open this door in 30 seconds, I'll break a window and climb in to make sure you're okay. And this time, I'll really do it. She sighed, half intrigued at the prospect of having company and half annoyed at the unexpected visit. You again? She called out through the door. Me again, London replied with a thumbs up. Reed made no motion to open the door. She simply continued to stare through the peephole. I realize your social skills are a little rusty, London said, but the next step in being a courteous human is to open the door and invite me inside. Sure, I'll invite you in on the eve of St. Never's Day, she shot back. We already went over this. No visitors. London rolled her eyes. Is Mug back? No. I figured you'd have a hard time sleeping tonight without him, London said sincerely. And you decided the solution to that was to linger on my doorstep like a stalker? Not exactly, though I am feeling kind of stalkerish at the moment, which is being compounded by your refusal to open the door like a normal person. London held up a large white pizza box. I bear gifts. Let me in and I'll share. Reed crossed her arms, her stubbornness overriding her growling stomach. Not hungry. I can hear your stomach from here. London lowered the pizza and frowned. Have you eaten anything since lunch? Where the hell did you find a pizza place open this time of night? I have connections, was all London offered. Since you're hungry and not going to sleep anytime soon, how about pizza and a movie? She held up A Dog's Purpose in front of the peephole. A sappy movie about a dog who dies over and over again? You suck at the supportive partner thing. Correction, it's about a dog who's reincarnated and eventually reunited with his owner. Great, thanks for spoiling the movie. Now I definitely don't want to see it. Will you just open the door, Reed? I'm freezing my buns off out here. She paused, wondering if she'd heard London right. Your what? My buttocks, derriere, booty, caboose, whatever you want to call it, is freezing as we speak. She shook her head. You mean your ass? Sure, London shrugged. I've heard it called that too. Reed set her hands on her hips. I'm not opening this door unless you say it. Say what? Ass. You know I don't curse, Reed. Then my door stays closed. Fine. London stepped closer to the peephole. You know what's now numb from impending hypothermia? My ass. Happy? Damn, Reed sighed. I didn't think you'd say it. Come on, just open the door. This beer's getting heavy. Beer? You didn't say anything about beer. Samuel Adams, Oktoberfest. London held the case aloft. That's the one you like, right? Some detective you are. She reached out to unlock the door. Could have saved us both a lot of time if you just led with that. So that's it. The end.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love your Never Stay joke.
Oh,
So much fun.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Jessie J. Thoma reading from Serenity. Do I have that right?
You do?
Okay, good. She has a whole series of these one-word titles, so I had to make sure I picked the right one. Jesse, tell us a little bit about the book and start reading whenever you're ready.
Sure. So Serenity is coming out in August, and for those who don't know, the first line of the Serenity prayer is, grant me the serenity to accept things that I cannot change. So that's where the title comes from. So one of the main characters is in active recovery. And the other one is a librarian, and NA meetings are held at the library. But they had an inauspicious meeting earlier in the prologue where Kit, who's the one in recovery, almost overdosed in the library. So there's a little bit of history there. But the book starts when she's in recovery. And they both are sort of struggling with something that they would rather not have to deal with, but they kind of have to accept that this is something that cannot be changed. So when they meet in this scene, I also am a little nervous and have been having kids screaming at me while I've been practicing too. So Michelle, maybe you want to take that role and yell at me. In this scene, when they are interacting, Kit has come to the library and she's been injured. And Thea has been called to stop Kit from aggressively typing on the computer and causing a bit of a ruckus at the library, unintentionally, but she's just mad. So that's where Thea finds her. Kit was using her left hand to hunt and peck at the keyboard. Her keystrokes were aggressive and the frustration was evident in her expression. Her right hand was resting on the desk next to the keyboard and it was heavily bandaged. Only the tips of her fingers and thumb were visible. Thea felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. Clearly, Kit was okay since she was sitting in front of her, assailing the keyboard, but she was injured. That bothered Thea in a way she didn't expect. Thea took a quick, calming breath since Kit hadn't yet seen her, and then stepped forward and knelt next to her. She leaned against the desk and caught Kit's eyes. "Who's winning?" Kit glanced up and looked happy to see her. Thea counted it as a win. "Not me." Kit leaned back in her chair and tried to run her hands through her hair. She put the bandaged one down and looked disgusted. "I wasn't spending my years of drug use improving my computer skills, and with one hand I can't type for shit." "What happened?" "I need a job." Kit waggled her right hand. "Just until this heals. I have bills to pay." "Did it happen at work? What about workman's comp or disability?" "Thea, I need a job. It's not enough, okay?" Thea swallowed her retort. Who was she to argue what Kit needed? Her argument was based on her own desire for Kit not to be hurt in the first place and for her to trust her enough to tell her what happened. Since she hadn't figured out time travel yet and Kit didn't seem to be feeling chatty, there was only one thing to do. Okay what?" Kit turned away from the computer and looked at Thea again. "Okay, let's find you a job." "Thea, that's not your job. I'll be nicer to your computer. Walter didn't need to call you over here to tell me to behave." "That's not why he got me. He knew I'd be worried about you, which I am, and it is my job, actually. So scoot your ass over so I don't have to watch you hunt and peck us both into old age." When Kit didn't move fast enough, Thea put her hand on her hip and utilized her stern librarian face. Kit moved over, although she looked reluctant. "Explain to me how it's your job to find me a job. Is this charity?" Thea sat down and opened a new browser. "Not charity at all. You're a library patron. You have a research query. I'm a librarian with the skills and resources to assist. Doesn't matter if you're looking for a specific book, the best paella recipe in the world, or the meaning of life. We're here to help." Kit was looking at her incredulously. "That's not really how I pictured librarians." Thea squelched a desire to be playful. "Don't worry, I get that a lot. Now, what kind of job are you looking for?" Kit looked thoughtful, a very different posture from the tight shoulders and aggressive typing of earlier. She'd seemed angry before, less so now. "I guess I hadn't really gotten that far. I just needed to make some progress." Kit nodded toward the computer, "Which I was clearly doing." "Obviously," Thea said. "Let's start with what you do know. Driving seems like it would be difficult with only one hand, so no rideshare services, I guess." "One hand, no car, and no driver's license," Kit said. "Are those important?" Thea held her thumb and index finger up half an inch apart. "Nothing that requires your own transportation, then." "Hey, I'm very good at transporting myself on the city bus, and my own 2 feet. I probably still remember how to ride a bicycle, but I don't have one." Thea stole a glance at Kit, who caught her looking and grinned. Kit was wildly attractive, but right now the best words to describe her were irresistibly adorable. Her hair was a bit of a mess. She was leaning on the desk haphazardly and trying to convince Thea a pair of sneakers counted as viable transportation. There's an entire gig economy out there. Thea loved this part of her job. Let's see if you can fit into it. It wasn't hard to rule out anything that required a car, heavy lifting, or the use of Kit's hands. Kit had drawn a firm line at peddling any products. She also wasn't interested in being a foot model or sleeping in a research lab for 2 weeks, no matter how well it paid. Ready to get back to work and give up on this? Kit was alternating between pacing behind the computer and being slumped against the desk. I already told you this is work, and we're just getting started. Seriously? Kit didn't look like she was feeling Thea's enthusiasm. She clearly wasn't acquainted with the thrill of the chase. Thea looked at the clock. They'd been working for longer than she thought. It was nearly lunch. 10 more minutes and then I'm taking you to lunch. You are? I am, Thea said, although it sounded a bit weak even to her. Hey, you can take it back. I won't be offended. Kit made sure to catch her eye. Absolutely not. I'm taking you to lunch. I'm not usually so impulsive. It just caught me off guard. The invitation was sincere. When the 10 minutes were up, Thea had a promising lead. Kit was reticent but hadn't ruled it out. It was up to Kit whether she was comfortable or not, but that wasn't work for hungry stomachs. Walter looked surprised when Thea told him she was going out for lunch. She wasn't sure if she'd ever done it before. She wondered if that made her as pathetic as she felt. Who had never gone out to lunch at work? Hey, you okay? You look like you're wrestling with something big and mean all of a sudden. Thea led the way out of the library, oddly liberated by leaving work in the middle of the day. Not at all, just realizing I haven't gone out to lunch in way too long. I'm happy you're making an exception for me. Just don't hold it against me when I look like a complete idiot using a fork with my left hand. My cousin Josh thought it was hilarious last night. I would never. Thea tried to keep a straight face. She looked at Kit, who smiled at her. Thea relaxed. Ready? As I'll ever be, Thea thought. She pointed Kit in the direction of her favorite restaurant and an entirely new direction for herself. She wasn't the woman who went out to lunch in the middle of the day, but maybe she wanted to be. There was only one way to find out.
Awesome. I don't know. You guys both admitted to being nervous, but I feel like you've set the bar. And I'm so glad that they're, weren't recording my first readings. Because I was nervous and so much worse than you guys. So awesome job.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Sinjin. Tell us a little bit about your book and start reading whenever you're ready.
Sure. It's called Quake City. It's my San Francisco novel. It's set all in one night in a gay club in San Francisco, and it's basically the amalgamation of every terrible date that you've ever had. I timed this at about 6 minutes, but please shut me up if I go over.
You're fine.
I don't want to take time away from anyone else. Okay, here we go. This is right from the start, so you shouldn't need any background. I don't want to go to a party, says Tom. I arch an eyebrow at him skeptically. Yes. Look at this. No human can withstand the eyebrow. I am crueler than Cruella de Vil, and more magnificent than Maleficent. Tom shrieks and withers under the shade my eyebrow is throwing at him, begging me for mercy, apologizing through his tears for being so depressingly heterosexual and refusing to go to one teeny tiny party. Or at least he would be, if he was looking at me, but he's still lying on my couch with his head on the armrest, browsing kinkbitches.com on his phone. I hold my eyebrow arched like that for a second in case he looks up and I can pretend I've just done it. Come on, Tom, look at me. Look at me. My face muscles start spasming. I drop the eyebrow and rub the side of my face, pretending it never happened. I don't know why I bother trying to have facial expressions for Tom. He even ignores the one I call the judgment of Meredith. Look it, see? It's all on the eyebrows and the lips. Before you even realize what's happened, I have become someone called Meredith. You don't know anything about Meredith, but you know she's judging you. She's judging you for all your dumbass ideas and your weird music. I imagine Tom has just told me Grace Jones is a second-rate singer. Come the fuck on. Who doesn't like Grace Jones? She's a goddess. Fucking Tom. Wouldn't know sexy if it came in his face. Who does he think he is anyway? Fuck you, Tom, I shout. You think this is all about you, but it isn't, you know? It just isn't. Tom is so startled, he loses his grip on his phone and drops it onto his nose. I would laugh, but Meredith is still too angry with him. What did I do, he says, giving me a sideways scowl. You know what you said, you son of a bitch. All I said was I didn't want to go to a party. Oh, right, the party. I put away my angry face for the time being, but the ghost of Meredith still haunts my eyebrows. Tom's all right looking, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing, though his hair is always too long and his hands are too rough from climbing mountains or wrestling goats or whatever it is straight people do all day. Now he's trying to act like a party is such a big deal. He's going to crash on my couch and mooch my hospitality for a week. The least he can do is come with me. Tough, I say. You have to go. There's only one key, so you won't be able to get back in without me. I won't go out. What if there's a fire? Then I'll die, he says. I don't even know what you're saying to me right now. Why are you going to be so freaking weird about it? I turn away from him to check myself in the mirror. Do these jeans make my ass look big? I can tell he's not looking, but he answers, massive. Never underestimate the power of the ass. I never have, he says. I turn to give him a view at it and flex one cheek after the other, doing an accent. Tom, look deep into my eye. I will hypnotize you with my sexy power. But he's not paying attention. So I say, oh, well, what's this? My stars, I appear to have dropped my handkerchief. I better bend over and pick it up before I get an attack of the vapors. How's that for an American accent, by the way? I've been practicing that one for weeks. I bend over in front of him and give him a face full of my magnificent ass. He looks away. He looks at me and says, what kind of party is this anyway? It's a gay party. Ah, he says, rolling his face into the sofa. What you mean is there's no chicks and I'm going to spend the whole time being leched on by queens. What am I supposed to do all night? Oh my God, it's like you have no idea how this even works. Listen up, Thomas. Women love the gays, and more importantly, they don't seem to mind that we don't give a flying fuck about them. What? It's like you and lesbians. They have what you want, but you're not allowed to have it. Wear what women want, and it makes them insane. Who can blame them? Smell me. How can anyone resist this? I thrust my neck at him so he can properly appreciate how magical I smell. He wrinkles his nose. It's burning my eyes. What are you saying? This is Jimmy Choo. A friend of mine once wore this, walked into a room full of tits, and came out sucking the only dick in the whole place. Maybe I'm not wearing enough. I fumble for a tiny bottle of very expensive fragrance and spray a cloud into the air. With grace and poise, I waft myself through it. The droplets land on my skin, cooling and refreshing, making sure I'm sexified enough to withstand a night of sweat and cigarette smoke. You look like a fish, Tom says. I look at him. Here I am trying to impart my wisdom and he's lost in his phone again. I snap my fingers at him. Thomas, Tomboy. What I'm saying is that the club is going to be full of lady girls, all horned up and nowhere to go. There might be other straight men there, I say, but you have a gay wingman. Harness the power of the butt lovins. I give you my personal guarantee you'll be swimming in tits by the end of the night. Now he starts cracking up, apparently for no reason. Maybe he's having a breakdown. Swimming, he gasps, a little too melodramatically if you ask me. Take it easy there, Liza, you're not up for any Oscars. Like there's a pool full of disembodied tits, is that how this works? An Olympic-sized pool full of tits, I say, trying to impress him with the scale of what I'm offering him. But now he's just being dumb. Is that what you think straight men want, he asks, then goes all serious. Wait a minute, you think you could pass for straight, don't you? Hell's damn, yes, I could pass for straight. Look, I'll do it right now. I drop my voice to sound like a stupid jock. Dude, that's totally baller. I'm hella down for some beer pong. I'm gonna saddle up that poontang and ride it over the mountain, Gangnam style. All right, I have no idea what I'm even saying anymore. My straight impression has died a sudden death, but between you and me, for the first 2, maybe 2.5 seconds, I shone like a star. It's uncanny, says Tom. I nod. Clearly I'm starting to get through to him. Aren't you getting ready, I ask? I am ready, he says. Can you believe it? He's lying there in his baggy shorts and black tank top like he was raised by wolves. Though he does actually look okay in them in a perverse gangbanger/frat boy kind of way. I swear with a bit of grooming and a nose hair trimmer, he'd clean up to a 7, maybe an 8 with rounding. But I'm not going to let this fly. I see what you're trying to do, I say. You're going to make this hard for me. It's fine, I like a challenge. You can dress like a Soviet bag lady if you like. I'm still going to get you laid by the end of the night. With a girl, right? All right, if you insist. Honestly, I don't know how you ever get laid if you're this picky all the time. Sometimes I don't even know where we're friends. I make you feel less like the crushing inevitabilities of life are bearing down upon you. Yeah, he's a real funny motherfucker. All right then, I say. Let's go.
So I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like
I was dying over here. It's a good thing I was muted. I was just cracking up. That's amazing.
I feel like you may have just cured the crushing inevitabilities of 2020. Thank you.
I can but try.
That was great.
Thank you very much.
That book is 15% off at the Bold Strokes Books web store. Everyone needs to read this book.
I just want St. John to read it to me because his facial expressions and that. I don't need to read it. I want him to read it to me.
And my shocking American accents.
Will be available every month as an add-on. All right. Moving on. Kathleen Knowles, reading from Trade Secrets. Tell us a little bit about Trade Secrets and read whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sandy. I'm so sorry for being late. Just crossed wires. It's great to be here. Hello to all of you listening out there. This book is usually described, the type is a roman à clef. So in other words, of taking real people, or at least one very real person, and built a story around it. My main characters are fictional, but it's the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. And I'm trying to imagine what it would be like inside that situation with a venture capitalist investor and one of the people who worked within the company in a lab, and what would happen if they met and they fell in love. So this is essentially the first date. And the other person I mention in here the most is Erica, which is the name of the Elizabeth Holmes character. That's her name is Erica, the CEO. To Tony's surprise, Sheila arrived to pick her up in a metallic blue Volt. A Mercedes or a BMW would have been more likely, given her profession. Sheila drove well, navigating downtown Palo Alto's crowded streets calmly. She announced where they were going, then fell silent as she drove. But the absence of conversation didn't feel uncomfortable to Tony. It seemed normal. Once they were seated at a table in Trefoil, an unpretentious place on Santa Clara Street, Tony took a closer look at Sheila. She was better looking than Tony had first thought. Her hair was precisely cut and somewhere between bronze and red, her eyes dark brown. Most striking was her air of serenity. Tony couldn't find any other way to put it. If she felt nervous about their meeting, she didn't know it. She didn't show it. Sheila didn't fidget or have any other anxiety tells, like not making eye contact or playing with her hair. In contrast, Tony's psyche was permeated with social unease, but she'd worked hard over the years to hide it. She didn't think Sheila was hiding anything. She was as she appeared. They gave their orders to the waiter, then returned their attention to one another. Tony was almost beginning to relax, as though Sheila's calm was contagious. She'd certainly moved from nervous to neutral anyhow. "What's it really like working at GHS?" Sheila asked. Something about Sheila and the way she asked that question made Tony think she wanted to know for real and wasn't simply making conversation or satisfying a get-to-know-you curiosity. Sheila didn't seem like a woman who asked trivial questions anyway. "It's exciting, it's hard, it's sometimes confusing, and it's certainly challenging." Tony wasn't surprised when Sheila said, "Tell me more." She wondered how forthcoming she ought to be. She had no idea if Sheila had a personal relationship with Erica, if it went beyond the investor-client connection. Tony didn't want what she said to Sheila to get back to Erica, whether it was positive or negative. In the few weeks since she'd started, she'd noticed Erica was clearly everyone's number one topic. Even Abe, who was as mild and non-committal as anyone, had an opinion, and it was clear their CEO awed and frightened him. To answer Sheila's question, though, Tony concluded she ought to stick to her own experience and to spin it positively, which it was, mostly. "Oh, with a startup, as you probably know, it can be chaotic. We, the immunoassay group, are working on essentially miniaturizing the assay." "What do you mean, immunoassay? You realize I'm ignorant when it comes to labs, though I can comprehend software as well as any non-tech person." "Oh, yeah, well, say you want to know if a person who has a certain disease. Their blood will have certain molecules, proteins, and the immunoassay is designed that a reagent, an antibody to that protein, will react by binding to it. The reagent has another chemical attached, a fluorescent or light-producing chemical, which is measured by an instrument that detects that light. This can be done with radiation as well, but we prefer fluorescence. The amount of light measures the amount of the protein of interest in the person's blood, and that amount says whether the person is sick or not." "Oh, very clear. Thank you." Sheila beamed. Tony changed the subject. "How did you ever end up being a venture capitalist. Tony sketched her background for Tony. And when she was done, Tony said, well, what's your daily work life like? Sheila laughed. You'd be surprised just how boring it is. I mostly go to back-to-back pitch meetings, one right after the other. It's extremely exhausting. I sometimes want to say, yeah, okay, you can have the money, please. Just stop talking. I have to struggle to stay focused. I either want to say yes to everyone, I have what my dad calls happy ears, or I'm out of sorts and I want them all to shut the fuck up. It was Tony's turn to laugh. That description, along with the curse word, brought Sheila down from the pedestal Tony was dangerously close to putting her on. She was a mere human being who sometimes was bored or frustrated or inattentive and was certainly irreverent. She now seemed more ordinary and at the same time infinitely more attractive than the more rarefied yet superficial portrait of her that Tony's psyche had painted. They moved on to more general topics such as music and movies, and after they finished their entrees, they perused the dessert menu. I think this occasion warrants dessert, don't you? Sheila asked archly. I agree, Tony matched Sheila's tone, if we can share. That seems the most prudent course. Tony couldn't tell if Sheila was making fun of her or flirting. When they received their strawberry ganache and 2 forks, Sheila said, I read about all the tests that GHS is offering. They want to use Erica's invention to do the test. Is that what you're using? The intimate act of sharing a piece of cake, or so it seemed to Tony, was causing her to want to be open with Sheila. Or maybe it was the glass and a half of wine she'd drunk. No, we have to first make sure our assay will work with super tiny blood samples. Then the engineering group will design all the robotics and the servo mechanisms to mimic what we do at the bench. Really? Erica gave me the impression that was already done and you were perfecting it, Sheila said quietly in an even tone, but Tony froze. My group is. I think the engineers might have a prototype, Leonardo, that does a couple of tests. I honestly don't know for sure. Well, I'm certainly familiar with CEOs making extravagant promises about their products. I always hear their pitches with a certain amount of skepticism, Sheila said. I don't expect you to blab about all the technical details. I'm sure Erica wouldn't approve. Nope, she likes to keep discussion of details to a minimum. She focuses on the big picture. Tony thought she was notably closed-mouthed with her own employees, who were then, in turn, oddly reticent with each other. It was unlike any other place Tony had worked. The typical biotech company environment was rife with gossip, speculation, and all kinds of talk. But people had to work across groups and develop approaches that included everyone's input. That wasn't done at GHS. Erica's always telling us we're going to change the world, Tony said, thinking that was a positive thing to say. She told me the same thing, Sheila said, and laughed. I imagine that's what she says to everyone. When she talked about how Leonardo will revolutionize medical testing, I believed her. That's exactly why I wanted to work at GHS. I want to be part of that revolution. Well, that's wonderful. Here's to changing the world. Sheila fixed her gaze on Tony, who grinned back.
Thank you. That's awesome. Here's to changing the world. All right. So last session, I introduced the final reader by saying I left the best to last, and the other readers were very unhappy.
Sandy.
They really didn't appreciate that. So I guess we're going to have to go with last but not least.
That works.
Georgia Beers, reading from your August release, Hopeless Romantic. Tell us a little bit about it.
Hopeless Romantic is about a divorce attorney who is a hopeless romantic and a wedding planner who no longer believes in marriage and love. I'm going to read you a little ways in. We have 4 people in this scene. We have Leah Scott and her little sister Kelly. Kelly is getting married, and Leah has always taken care of Kelly, so she's going with her to all of the wedding planners, and Kelly likes this wedding planner, which is Hopeless Romantic. The owner is Teddy, She and Leah have already had a little bit of a spark, their first meeting. So this is their second meeting where they take time to look at each other. Also in this scene is Teddy's assistant Preston, just so you know. All right. Teddy was beautiful. Leah took in the ivory sweater dress Teddy wore, a classic contrast to her olive skin. Gold bangle bracelets jingled softly when Teddy moved her hand. Her hair was down, a soft brown that looked like it might be a shade darker underneath. Subtle brown eyeshadow accentuated the deep dark of Teddy's incredible eyes, and her full lips shone with a glimmer of a coat of lip gloss, just a hint of pink. And it wasn't odd at all that she noticed Teddy's impressive posture, right? Her spine was straight, her shoulders were squared the whole time she spoke, twisted, moved her arms. Teddy wasn't tall, but she seemed it. The way someone carried themselves said a lot about them, Leah's mother used to say, and nobody in her recent memory illustrated that point better than Teddy Baker. Her presence said, yes, I'm attractive. I also run this show, and I will snap you like a twig if I have to. Leah felt the corners of her mouth tug up at the thought. What are you smiling at? Kelly's question took her by surprise, and Leah sat up a little straighter. Teddy's eyes were on her as well, and Leah swore she could feel them straight down to her. Just happy to see you so happy, she replied, pulling an answer out of her ass so fast she impressed even herself. Teddy's gaze stayed on her for an extra beat. It did things to Leah. Shoulder bumps were Kelly's signature move of affection, and she leaned into Leah with one. Can you give Teddy the deposit? Oh, of course. Leah fished her wallet out of her purse and pulled out her Visa card. Preston took it from her hand and slid it through the square he'd plugged into his tablet. Leah Scott, he said as he watched the transaction on the screen. Your name seems familiar to me. Pretty common name, Leah said. She's a lawyer, Kelly said, pride in her tone. Oh, yeah? Preston turned the tablet around and pointed. Just sign here with your finger. What kind of lawyer? Leah signed, hit the green button that read done. I'm a divorce attorney. A heavy coffee mug has to hit the ground just right in order to shatter, and Teddy's apparently had, the sound of the crash startling the other three enough to make them each flinch in their seats. Leah's head whipped towards Teddy, who sat wide-eyed and seemingly shocked, a Rorschach ink blot of a coffee stain blossoming on her beautiful ivory dress. Oh my God, are you okay? Kelly sprang into action, her kindergarten teacher reflexes kicking into high alert as they did any time something was spilled or broken. Teddy stood slowly, head down, her focus seemingly on the puddle of coffee and pieces of mug scattered across the hardwood floor. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm sorry, clumsy. She pointed over her shoulder, blinked several times, never meeting Leah's eyes, and then turned on her heel. Preston, set up the next appointment, would you? In the next 3 seconds, she had disappeared into the back. A full 5 seconds of silence passed before Kelly and Leah exchanged looks. Is she okay? Leah asked Preston, whose head was turned towards Teddy's exit. I'm sure she's fine. He turned back around, uncomfortable. It was the only way to describe him. Let's get your next appointment on the schedule. 10 minutes later, Leah and Kelly stood at Kelly's car. That was so weird, Kelly said, pulling open her car door and slipping inside. Right? Such a strange reaction to a broken mug. Leah looked back at the storefront. Do you think she cut herself? Or she's allergic to divorce attorneys? Kelly chuckled and started the car. As if sensing Leah's confusion, Kelly said, that's when she dropped the mug, when you said you were a divorce attorney. With a snorted laugh, she asked, you didn't handle her divorce or something, did you? Leah blinked at her. Kelly's smile faltered, no longer lighthearted. You didn't, did you? Leah wrinkled her nose and shrugged. Is she divorced? I mean, I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility. Oh, great. Kelly let her forehead fall against the steering wheel, then immediately lifted it up again. Well, we've paid a deposit, and she's the best in the business, so let's hope if you did, we can all just remain professional. Yeah, okay. She got me, Leah. Pleading her case, thrilled and happy, excited anticipation. Leah loved seeing these things on her sister's face, hearing them in her voice. She got everything I mentioned. I felt so comfortable with her. I know. I don't want to unhire her. Then we won't. We'll work it out. Don't worry. Words she'd said to Kelly their entire lives, and she'd always made it so, no matter how much of a pretzel she'd had to twist herself into. She always worked it out for Kelly. Kelly held her gaze for a beat. Okay, I love you. Love you too. Leah slammed Kelly's door and watched her pull away. One last glance at Hopeless Romantic, no Teddy standing in the window like last time. Well, that's a damn shame, she muttered. waiting an extra moment or two just in case. Then she turned away and headed for her car. She had information to find.
Awesome. Thank you. So that's a wedding planner and a divorce attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
Hopelessly
Drama.
romantic.
That's juicy drama. I'm into that.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So I have a question to start us off. If you want to ask these lovely authors a question, please put it in the Q&A box. And I will hopefully get to them all. But I noticed with all your readings that humor plays an important point, whether it's kind of hilarity or comedy or witty banter. So what do you guys think about the use of humor in your books? Do you use it on purpose? Does it just kind of come to you as you write? Are there any do's or don'ts in the use of humor? Why don't you start us off, St. John?
I use humor in books because it's what keeps me entertained. I'd be worried if I tried writing something too serious. I'd bore myself. And if you're not interested in what you're writing, I don't know how you can expect anyone else to be interested in it either. But as a tool, like it makes the dramatic things more dramatic. It makes the scary things more scary. It makes the ridiculous things a little bit more bearable. It's one of the great tools a writer has, and I can't use it enough. I love it.
I mean, I feel like you should only ever write humor. Just
Thank you.
I found your niche.
I think.
I second that.
What about you, Michelle? The use of humor in your books?
I love writing for a funny character. I think so far in each of my books, there's been a lot of sort of playful, funny banter between characters, and I love writing funny dialogue. So yeah, it's a must for me, and I feel the same way that it's got to be entertaining, and that's what keeps me interested. So yeah, I just have fun with it, and it's not really something I plan. It kind of just unfolds scene by scene, and sometimes I find myself just laughing out loud at my characters, So I know that probably sounds strange, but that's how it happens for me. I'd be interested to see how it happens for the other panelists.
I feel like in your books, particularly Michelle, your humor makes them so endearing. Really, just want to hug them. They're just so endearing, and I think the humor really plays a role there. What about you, Jessie? Use of humor in your books?
Yeah, it didn't start out being something that I was writing purposely, but some of my books are sort of like action-packed, and I think they're kind of like a little bit more in the like action movie kind of, the plot moves quickly. There's a lot of car chases and shoot 'em up scenes, and I think anytime you've got kind of intense action, humor is something that can kind of temper that a little bit, and that's something that is kind of important to break up the action beats a little bit. And I think usually when you're in a really heavy action scene, if it's not really heavy, then there's usually a comedic character involved in that. I think for the purpose of breaking it up and letting you know that everything's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And then some of the other work that I write has, I think that was described to me, characters that exist on the fringes of polite society. And so because of that, I think adding some humor again lets it not get too heavy. This character is in active recovery from drug use, and that could be something that could veer kind of heavy, but I think, it's reality for a lot of people. And so adding, I think, a little bit of humor and lightness to it is something that allows it to still exist quite easily within a romantic genre. And I think, as St. John said, it makes it interesting to write. It endears me to the characters I'm writing, and they each kind of come out with their own sense of humor and style, and so everybody's a little different when I write them. But yeah, I think it would be boring if there was no humor in a book that I'm writing.
Yeah, I love what you said about how humor is a break from the action and the seriousness of the topics that you tackle in your book. That's a really great point. What about you, Kathleen? I know that the part that you just read was quite serious, but you do have some humor in your books. So what's your thought process in how you add that and where you add that and the role that it plays?
You know, it's interesting you thought it was serious. I wasn't thinking of it as that serious. In case nobody could tell, Tony is a nerd. Tony is one of those, you know, laboratory type people, you know, lab rats as we call ourselves, when I worked in a lab. But I think a sense of humor in a person is really attractive. I don't think anybody is attractive either as a romantic partner or as a friend unless he or she has a sense of humor. And life is basically kind of ridiculous, and humans behave in funny ways and odd ways, and that's kind of just the way it goes. And I like to see the humor in sort of the things that happen to people and their attitudes about things. And I couldn't imagine ever writing a book that doesn't have some humor in it. Even the last one that you wrote that you probably think that was really humorless, but it exists. You know, it exists, and it's fun to read, as people have pointed out. And I don't think that life or characters are any good without it.
Absolutely. All right, I have a spin on this question for you, Georgia Beers.
Oh, a spin.
A spin, that's right. I'm just pulling one from my list here because it's about humor. How do you write banter? Do you have conversations out loud with yourself? Are they in your imagination? You're quite well known for your banter, for your witticisms. So how do you write those scenes?
That is an excellent question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer for it other than they tend to mostly happen organically. Like, I'm not usually writing along and think, oh, I better add some humor here. It tends to happen, although there are exceptions, because I will find if I feel that there is chemistry lacking in a certain scene, I'll throw some humor in, because I personally find humor very sexy. And since I write romance, I want to put in as much sexy as I can. I think Melissa Braden calls them sexy breadcrumbs. So you got to leave the sexy breadcrumbs. And I do have the conversations out loud. I absolutely do. My animals think I'm a little crazy. It's just me, but I'll say them out loud because I want to know what is that. First of all, what does that sound like? Second of all, what face is she making when she says it? I don't know if the rest of you do this, but when I'm writing and I'm trying to describe a facial expression, I'll be like, what is she doing? Is she wrinkling? It's ridiculous, but it's how I figure out a way to describe what's happening on this person's face. So between those two things, I think that there's an equal element of happens organically and injected by me.
I think the great thing about writing banter is that if you're actually having a conversation, if you want to be witty, you've got to do it now. You have no time to think about it. But if you're writing it, you've got ages. You could write
exactly.
the next 6 months later.
That's the best, isn't it?
I know. This is the lazy way of being funny. I love it.
Yeah. Because I'm that person who, if I have an argument or some kind of a debate or something, yes, later at home, I'm like, oh, I should have said this. Mm-hmm. But that's what's great about being a writer, as Sinjin says, is I can go, what would be right to say here? And I can think about it all day long if I want you to come up with the right line. So that's awesome.
We're all so much funnier in our books than in life. Alrighty, if you had to write a sequel for one of your books, which one would it be? Let's start with Kathleen.
Oh boy.
You actually have written a sequel, I feel like, so.
I have, if I were going to write a sequel to one of my books, which one would it be? I think Taking Sides, the political one. I think the two characters would have an interesting time trying to figure out what their life was like, since it was people who had a project, and then they were the ones moving from San Francisco. They end up falling in love, and one moves from San Francisco to Indianapolis. That would be challenging, I think. And greetings from San Francisco, Sinjin. That's where I live.
Oh, nice.
So that would be, I think that would be fun to contemplate. And I actually did write a sequel. I wrote 2 sequels to the first book, and the second one was you know, I find the relationships, people's relationships and how they go forward as interesting in a different way as the falling in love part.
For sure.
So
please say
that's what I would do.
Quake City. Please say you're going to write a sequel to Quake City.
I don't know if I could. I don't know. I have no idea what it would be about.
You make it work.
Well, the thing about Quake City is it's just a fragment of all these people's lives, and it's a fragment of so many different stories, and they continue on. So I'm sure you could get some good, juicy material for a sequel. I think I'd do, if I were going to do one, I'd do one for Radium Baby, which was my first novel, which is a race around the world set in the 1920s. And one of the characters was called Mrs. Chumley, and she is this overbearing, incredibly rude, offensive, self-important rich woman who just gets up everyone's nose. And not only is she the most fun character, but going into the 1930s, she's the character whose life is about to fall apart with the Depression and everything that's going to happen to her, Prohibition being repealed and everything like that. It's the 30s are her worst nightmare. So she's got the juiciest story. I would love to write that.
Awesome. We'll be on the lookout for that one. And apologies to Kathleen. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
It's okay.
Jesse, how about you? Which book would you write a sequel to?
I have written sequels before. I have a book called The Chase that I wrote sequels. They're challenging to write, to carry on. As Kathleen mentioned, they're interesting to write. But I think I am going to follow up Serenity with the next two parts of the Serenity Prayer, Courage and Wisdom. They're not really sequels because they are standalone, but they're thematically sort of linked. So I guess Serenity is the book that I'm going to write a semi-sequel. There'll be some secondary characters that are will be throughout, but they're not technically sequels.
I feel like it counts. What's the title of the next one, and when can we buy it?
Will be Courage, and I don't know, Sandy, you would know more than I would when it'll be out. I'm finishing it right now.
Yeah, to rack my brain. I feel like it's coming out early 2021. Be on the lookout for that. Michelle, I want to warn you that the only appropriate answer to this question is silver and gold, because we have already some comments in the Q&A about whether you're going to write it, you're going to turn it into a series. Would that be your answer, or do you have another one?
Sure. No, you know, I don't know. It's funny because I enjoyed the characters in Silver and Gold so much that I have, when I saw some of the reviews coming in requesting a follow-up book, that definitely piqued my interest. But I've also had a lot of, I've gotten some emails from readers about my book Endangered. They really want to follow up to that. So I think that's on my list for the next book after I finish the one I'm working on now. And then I'll revisit Silver and Gold. I really had so much fun writing that book. So we'll see. It's a possibility.
All right, we'll be on the lookout for some sequels from Michelle Larkin. All right, Georgia Beers, so many books. Think back, so many books. Which one would you write a sequel to?
You know, that's a hard question because I have trouble thinking of romance in a sequel format. For me, when I get them together and they have their happily ever after, I kind of do this and move on to the next couple. But I think if I had to choose one, I think I would go with Starting from Scratch, because I left Avery pregnant. And I would I think it would be interesting to write about the two of them together with now 2 children and see how their relationship how they manage with that.
Georgia, that's horrible. How long has she been pregnant now? That's years ago.
A really long time.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in for BSB Preview, which was readings from our August 2020 releases. All the links to these amazing books are in the chat roll, and you can get 15% off at the BSB web store until 7:30. So you have about 35 minutes please go buy their books. And thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.